I have to confess I'm nervous because I've never done this before, like explained it. So you'll have to deal with whatever I can say. And we'll start with the first two verses, and then, no, the three, and then we have to finish the incorrect signs, but we'll do that. Okay, just before you start, this translation is, I don't know if have you heard of this translator called Gavin Kilty? Yeah. So this is Gavin's translation, but in his translation, he's written that he had to adapt the translation according to the commentary, because he's writing it as a translation that is for a specific Sakya author. And because everyone comments the Pramana Vartika differently, he had to tweak rightfully the root verses according to the commentator. Gavin's choice of terms is still different from ours in our text. So I've tried to change some of them according to our text so that we have similar terminology instead of like where it's homologous, I've tried to put it back to homologous, heterogeneous, etc., because otherwise you'll have a whole new set of terms. That's one. And the other one is I've changed it every now and then where the way I have studied it and the way we have read it is more familiar to me. So there are some differences from Gavin's, but largely it's based on Gavin's translation. Gavin's text, you can find out later which one it is. Okay? That's one. The second one is then you might be wondering which is the correct one. We don't know what the correct one is. In India itself, the Pramana Vartika is one of those texts that has two main traditions. The two main disciples commented it differently. And then after that, everyone has understood it slightly differently. In Tibet, all the different schools have a different take on it. And then therefore each commentary is going to have to comment the root verses in a certain way. And so you don't have one consensus on the 100% accurate understanding of the Pramana. It's a very cryptic kind of text also. Yeah? Yeah. They didn't translate it. They commented. Yeah. There's Shakya Shri Buddhi and Devendra Buddhi. Those are the two. The first two, but then there's many who later did it. So that, I think, don't worry too much about which is the right translation. Just understand what's being said. Largely, there's consensus. On certain points, there's differences. On those points, specialize later. First, let's do the general meaning, yeah? Okay? Okay? There's a translation from the, 60s? Yeah, that's possibly the most accurate because that's being done out of Sanskrit, but it's really old English. So if you want to read that, that's also there. I think we have that as well, no? It's available. Okay, great. So you can compare the one in the group, this one, and then if you want to get Gavin's text, you can get Gavin's text because that also has a commentary to it. Okay? But that is a commentary by Gorampa, Kunkhyang Gorampa, who was a Sakya author, which is slightly different from the one that we're familiar with, okay? So we're getting introduced, but just so that you know, we're getting introduced to the Pramana Vartika, trying to look at the root verses only. Of course, I'm the one who's saying it to you, so I am influenced by the tradition that I have studied in. If you read another text, that will be influenced by another tradition that someone else has studied in, whoever you studied from. So as you move closer and closer and you study more a text, then you can go closer to the original thing. But it was written in, I think, 500 AD, so it's an old text. Lots has been developed on it. Yeah? Okay? We said, no, the other day, does anyone remember what it was? Oh, the significance of the text. Wait, so we have to, you know that traditional studies are divided into 5 groups of topics, right? And we're doing 3 of them in this, not this month, but over the course. The first one is Abhidharma, then there's Pramana, there's Madhyamaka, there's what's called Pragya Paramita, and then there's Vinaya. Vinaya is mostly for monastics, so we don't do Vinaya. Abhidharma is, I think it's often translated as phenomenology and cosmology. It's got a lot of like categories of how to divide phenomena and how to speak of them. The view of Abhidharma is mostly Vaibhashik and Sautantrika. The three ones that we're doing are Pramana, Madhyamaka, and Pragya Paramita. Pragya Paramita is the stages of the path, which is our fourth year. Pramana is the reasoning to establish both the path and the reasoning to establish the view, which is Madhyamaka. So the three studies which are very commonly necessary are, in Tibetan it's just abbreviated into U Phar Tsesum. Uma means Madhyamaka, Phar is Pharchin Pragya Paramita, and Tsema Pramana. The reason why this is because Madhyamaka is the view that you need to have to be able to attain liberation. That's the assumption, right? The Madhyamaka say that's the view. Pragya Paramita is how do you proceed along the path once you have that view. And Pramana is giving you the tools to understand it. So the most, I think, accurate translation of this kind of study is epistemology, which are the tools to acquire knowledge. How do you know that the knowledge you get is accurate or not? So pramana as a subject, pramana literally means valid cognition, right? Okay? Valid cognition means what are you calling valid, what constitutes valid perception, what is invalid. The discussion of that, and then how do you know things through valid cognition is the main subject matter of pramana, right? I think in the Tengyur, I don't even know how many volumes there are, but it's a huge, I think maybe after Pragya Paramita it might have the most, I don't know, it's got a lot of writing on it. Of all the texts, the one that is possibly most popular is this one. So Pramana is the subject matter, Pramana Vartika it's a tika. So it's an explanation or a commentary on the writings of Pramana, which is the name that is given to Dignaga's original text. Remember we had said Dignaga is the founder of Buddhist logic. Yeah? So he wrote a text called I think in art, you've come across it, it says Compendium of Valid Cognition in our text. That's Dignaga's text. The Pramana Vartika is a commentary on that text. Okay? So the significance is it's going to describe, the Pramana Vartika in the first chapter describes how do you discern hidden phenomena through inference. So the entire discussion is inference, the subject matter is inference, and how do you discern phenomena that are hidden through inferential processes. So it's an explanation of inference, which requires an explanation of correct reasons, which requires an explanation of incorrect reasons, and it requires an explanation of how the conceptual mind engages in its object, because inference is conceptual. So that's the subject matter of the first chapter. The second chapter is then, how do you use inference to establish the path? So the Buddha being valid, the three objects of refuge, the four truths, that's all second chapter, using inference. The third chapter is direct perception. How do you distinguish between valid perception and not valid? Not conceptual, but direct perception. Yeah? And then the fourth chapter is consequences and proof statements to establish things not for yourself, but now to others. So that's the corpus of the Pramana Vartika. Okay? Is that okay? The third chapter is direct perception. Valid cognition, according to Buddhist epistemology, is either inferential or direct. The discussion of inference is the first chapter. The discussion of direct perception is the third chapter. And then you remember proof statements and consequences, which we touched upon, that's the fourth chapter. So what makes a proof statement valid, what makes consequences valid, etc. Yeah? Just so that you have some information, we said this earlier already. The order of the first chapter and second chapter is different in Sanskrit and in Tibetan. In Sanskrit, the second chapter comes first, the first chapter comes second. In Tibetan, they switch the order. That's one piece of information that you should know. The other thing that you should know is the view of the Pramana Vartika is another hotly debated topic. We don't know if it is a Chittamatra text or a Sautantrika text. The first and second chapter are largely Sautantrika based. The third chapter has two sections. The first half of it is establishing the Sautantrika view. The second chapter is clearly talking about Chittamatra, which has led to a debate about whether the entire text is Sautantrika or Chittamatra. So that's another debated topic. If you ask people what Dharmakirti is, most people will say he's Chittamatra or mind only, as his view is mind only. Many people will say his view is mind only, but in the Pramana Vartika, he's explaining the Sautantrika view as well. Okay? One consensus is the first and second chapter are common presentations. These are accepted by Sautantrikas and Chittamatras. Yeah? The third chapter, then when it gets into detail, it's talking about the mind only view. Otherwise, the rest of the text is common to both traditions. Yeah, that's another thing that might be helpful for you to know, because if you read later, you'll find these things. Okay? Is that okay? Yeah? According to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and according to, gosh, everyone, it's almost indispensable as far as the text goes. If you really want to understand Buddhism the way it has been taught traditionally, I don't think you can do it without understanding Pramana. One, because of course you familiarize with the language of Pramana, which you'll find everywhere. So if you don't know the concepts and you're not familiar with the language, when you go and read, the more detailed discussions will be hidden to you. You can't navigate that material. It's like when you do, I'm assuming, when you do really important advanced physics without mathematics, there's only so much you can do, right? You know how at some point they just start talking in numbers and strange symbols? It's kind of like that. When you get into the real detailed study of Madhyamaka and Pragya Paramita, if you don't have Pramana, you just can't. Like, it's too tedious. So as far as the terminology goes, it's fundamental, because it was discussed traditionally and is traditionally discussed through this terminology, right? Proof statements, inference, three modes, heterogeneous case, homologous case, heterogeneous example, homologous example. That's just basic language that you find everywhere. Okay? That's one. The other one is it's also telling you how you test the validity of what's being said for yourself. Which again, if you're not familiar with, there's only so much that you can engage in, right? And now when we do the homage, you'll see Dharmakirti saying something similar, okay? So it's giving you all the terminology and the concepts, and it's telling you how to train in reasoning for yourself so that you can get conviction. It's known as the eyes for the teachings of the Dharma, Pramana. Have you heard the story of Dignaga? I think most of you have. Anyways, Dignaga got very upset because he was writing the homage to his text and he kept getting interrupted. An abbreviated version of it, yeah? When he kept getting interrupted, tradition says, and whether this is true or not doesn't matter, I think it's going to at least make you understand the importance that is placed on Pramana. When Dignaga got very upset in Odisha, which is also where Gyan is from actually, they went on pilgrimage and they found the cave where apparently this was composed in Odisha. When Dignaga was upset that this other opponent wasn't engaging in honest debate, he said to have taken a stone and tossed it in the sky and said, when it lands back on earth, when it lands back on the ground, I'm going to give up the wish to benefit other beings and writing these things. And the stone never came down, is the thing. So when he looked up, apparently the story says Manjushri was holding it saying, you compose the text, because in the future this is going to be the eyes for being able to see the teaching of the Buddha. So I will always be with you, I will always protect you, you compose your text. Traditionally, that's the importance that's placed on Pramana. Without it, you can't see what the teachings are saying, right? So that's the relevance of it. The attitude you need to have is very clear in the homage and it's called Tsompar Damcha, or how is it translated in English? No, no, not that. It's the, yes, what is it? Commitment to compose. Yeah, that's the second verse, okay? So now we'll just read it, okay? But we'll read it along with our text because right now it's all about inference, right? So if you just pull it out, it says, to the one in whom the web of conceptions has completely disappeared, who possesses profound and vast forms, and whose light rays of that which is good in every aspect radiate everywhere, I prostrate. You might want to write the details, but basically, the one in whom the web of conceptions has completely disappeared refers to the Dharmakaya of the Buddha. Yeah? The web of conceptions is the two kinds of obscurations. That's how it's translated. Yeah? So the removal of the two kind of obscurations then is the body of the Buddha. Because the mind of the Buddha is freed from these conceptions, it possesses profound and vast forms. The profound refers to the ability of the Buddhas to know reality as it is, so the ultimate truth. And vast refers to the ability of the Buddha to know the multiplicity of phenomena, so all conventional truth. Because the Buddha has removed the web of conceptions, the Buddha's mind spontaneously, simultaneously knows the ultimate truth and the multiplicity of phenomena, so the profound and vast forms. These refer to the two aspects of the Buddha's mind. Yeah? So the first line refers to the quality of abandonment of the Buddha, what the Buddha's abandonments are. He has abandoned the two obscurations. And the second line refers to the realizations of the Buddha, which is realizations of the ultimate truth and the conventional truth. Again, in other commentaries, it's slightly different. We're just following one tradition, okay? Because of having attained this state and having this, the Buddha is able to fulfill the benefit of all sentient beings simultaneously. And that's line 3, which is because the Buddha's realization or the state of Buddhahood has these complete abandonments and complete realizations, the activities of the Buddha are compared here to rays of light that are good in every aspect. Here, the good in every aspect is explained. It's good in every aspect and it radiates everywhere because it's good in every aspect in the sense that, yeah, because there is no, it never ceases, yeah, it possesses all positive qualities in their entirety. There's nothing lacking and there's nothing that needs to be further added to it. It's complete. And the radiating everywhere means because it has that state, it radiates everywhere in terms of it's complete in its subject matter that it explains. The teachings of the Buddha are complete. Yeah. They will remain forever. So everywhere in terms of content, everywhere in terms of time, and everywhere in terms of according to the ability of all individual beings, what they need according to what their predispositions are, what they can understand, how much they can fathom. So because the Buddha possesses the abandonments and the realizations, from that state naturally the message or the activities of the Buddha radiate everywhere in terms of being able to be complete in what they teach, being complete being in the sense that they will be there forever, and complete because they can completely understand the requirements of all beings and give exactly that. Therefore, this is explaining the qualities of Buddhahood, which is the Dharmakaya, which is the Buddha's body, and the emanation body of the Buddha, which is what we perceive. It's explaining the fulfillment of one's own needs and the fulfillment for the needs of others. To that, then, that's the object of homage, okay? Which is to then that I prostrate. So that's the object of veneration, okay? On the final debate, we done this earlier, now we'll do it again. This is going to be the closing verse. So, Venerable and Jason, when you're asked to explain it, you'll have to explain what it means, okay? Just a short explanation, yeah. Just so that you know whose light rays of that which is good in every aspect. Good in every aspect is this in the Sanskrit, it says Samanta Badra, which means good in every aspect. The literal translation of Samanta Badra is good in every aspect. But it's also the Bodhisattva Samanta Badra, no? So sometimes one tradition says that it's a homage to Samanta Badra. Another tradition says it's not a homage to the Bodhisattva, it's using the Bodhisattva's name to pay homage to the qualities of the Buddha. Yeah? So there's many different traditions on how this text has been taken forward. Okay? The second, the commitment to compose, is a little disheartening initially and you wonder why it's there, but there's a very beautiful explanation of it. So it says, most beings are attracted to the ordinary and do not possess the skill of discernment. They do not therefore aspire to these excellent teachings. Moreover, they possess a resentment, the stain of envy. With these they are wholly endowed, and therefore, although I do not have the thought that this will benefit others, for a long time my mind has been acquainted with this excellent explanation, and to eagerly familiarize myself with it, I take joy in composing this. This praise to this commitment to compose, there's two ways that it's explained. The first one is explicitly it's saying, it's identifying the faults of a recipient. Yeah? Implicitly, it's stating the requirements of a worthy recipient. Yeah? Okay? So explicitly it's saying, if you are attracted to the ordinary, and here the ordinary has many beautiful ways it's explained. It says, ordinary in the sense that, yeah, you are just concerned with ordinary, everyday, worldly things. You're not concerned with anything further. Ordinary in the sense you just want to be satisfied with ordinary explanations. Third, you are only interested not in the meaning but in the eloquence of explanation. Yeah? So most people, most beings are only attracted to this. They're not really concerned with understanding the immaculate teachings. They're not concerned with understanding the meaning of the teachings. They're only concerned with everyday, ordinary, worldly things. They're concerned with ordinary texts, ordinary information, and they're only concerned with the eloquence of that information. They don't seem to be concerned with understanding. Those who do wish to understand and they are concerned lack the skill of discernment. And so even though they may desire to understand the meaning, they don't have the ability to understand it. They don't cultivate that ability of theirs to understand it. As a result, such people who are concerned with ordinary goals, and if they do have the correct goals, they are not developing the skill of discernment, they will not aspire to these teachings. On top of which, for those who do have this attitude, they harbor resentment and envy to those who do have this attitude and do have this skill. As a result, Dharmakirti says, I have no wish to benefit such people. I am not writing this text for them because I have been acquainted with the excellent explanation. Excellent explanation here refers to Dignaga's text. Okay? I am writing this to familiarize myself with it. So the explicit meaning of this is, I am not composing this text for that kind of person. Yeah? Implicitly, however, if you don't have these qualities, this is for you, is the implicit meaning. And in all the commentaries that I have found, it says, therefore, what is the implicit meaning? How is it identifying a worthy recipient of the teachings of the Buddha? Everyone quotes that thing from Aryadeva, which is unbiased. Those three qualities: surne, unbiased, discerning, interested. So if you remember the one that Gen the other day was saying, when someone had asked a question about how should one approach, what is the attitude that one should have in study, this is again mentioned here. If you are interested, if you are discerning, and you are unbiased, then you fulfill the definition of a worthy recipient for understanding the teachings, especially the teaching of Dignaga. Yeah? In the commentary over here, it says something very beautiful. There's another text by, so some people have come and said, well, that's not really what he's saying. He really doesn't want to do this for any of us. You're just making us feel better by saying, no, he's doing it for us. And the reason why it's not a feel-good statement of trying to justify that he actually does care about us, there's two things that have been cited. One is it says most beings, doesn't say all beings. That's number one. Okay? In the other one, there is another text that Dharmakirti is written, which is in Sanskrit is called Pramana Nishchaya, which is certainty, the certainty on valid cognition. It's his second text. In that, in the homage of that text, Dharmakirti writes this. So I'll just tell you that afterwards. But what Dharmakirti is writing over there in that second text, this is what he writes. Yeah. I don't think you need to write it down, but just so that you know what it says. Yeah. So in that text, he says, because people have misunderstood the meaning of Dignaga's treatise, moved by love for wanting to remove their misperception and their mistaken opinions on the utility of pramana and the misunderstanding of Dignaga's teachings, I am composing that text. That's Dharmakirti's second text. That second text is an abbreviation of this text. This is the main longest one. That's the middling one, and then there's a condensed one. Okay? In the middling one, that's what Dharmakirti writes in the homage. I am writing this to remove misconceptions regarding Dignaga, the teachings, and the understanding of his text. That other homage, along with this homage, suggests that if you don't have these qualities that are being explicitly mentioned and you have the opposite qualities, then you are a perfect person in the perfect situation to understand the meaning of Dignaga's text. So there's a explicit explanation of the faults of a recipient, and implicitly it's saying what kind of qualities you need to have to be a recipient. In the commentary it says, if you have them partially, try and complete them. If you don't have them, aspire to them. If you have them, cultivate them. That's what the text is, the commitment to compose is saying over here, okay? Then the text officially begins. So the first verses then begins from there, okay? We'll only do one verse and then we'll open our text again. So the opening verse of the first chapter, which is laying down the ground rules or equipping someone who is supposed to have these kind of qualities to have access to Dignaga's teachings, which are then the eyes to be able to gain certainty in the teaching of the Buddha, starts with the definition of the three modes of correct evidence. Because whatever reasoning you do later, if it's not grounded on correct evidence, then it's not certain. Yeah? That's how this text opens. So the first verse reads, attribute of the subject of the probandum and pervaded by its other part. Such evidence is only of three types. That's it. Okay? This is because of the certainty of unaccompanied non-occurrence. Do you remember what unaccompanied non-occurrence is in our text? It came up again and again. If that doesn't exist, this doesn't exist. Yeah. Okay? Fallacious evidence is other. So the definitions of the three modes is being said. That which is an attribute of the subject of the probandum, that's the first mode. And so that thing which is an attribute of the subject of the probandum, one. Two, it is pervaded by the other part of the probandum. So the probandum has two parts, the subject and the predicate. Being an attribute of the subject of the probandum is an attribute of the subject. Being pervaded by the other part of the probandum, which is the predicate, is the positive and negative pervasions, right? Those are the three modes. Whatever has such qualities is evidence. Evidence here is correct evidence, right? Such evidence can only be of three kinds. The reason why it's of three kinds is because of unaccompanied non-occurrence. The reason why evidence is divided into three is because if something doesn't exist, another thing doesn't exist. This is then of three, it can be broken down into three. The positive side of it is if something exists, another thing exists, that can be either causal or same nature. And if it doesn't exist, that doesn't exist is using the negative aspect to show correct non-perception evidence, right? So through the non-accompanied non-occurrence, you end up with, and in the commentary, Gyaltsab Rinpoche he writes, you don't have to follow Gyaltsab Rinpoche. I'm just following him because this is what we're familiar with, okay? But he says it very nicely. He says, if unaccompanied non-occurrence is a thing and it's real, even if you don't like it, you have to accept that there's three kinds of evidence. Because if unaccompanied non-occurrence exists and things are related to one another, they're going to be related as one entity or as different entities. By default, you're going to end up with same nature relations or causal relations. And the fact that two things are related also suggests that if one was not to exist, the other would not exist. So you'll end up anyway, whether you like it or not, with non-perception evidence. So whether you like it or not, if in reality things depend on one another and are related, this is it. There's no other way around it. You might not like it. He actually says, Midu Shindu. Even if you don't want to accept it, that's just what it is. Okay? Everything that doesn't fulfill this criteria is fallacious evidence, it's false evidence, it's incomplete. Okay? That's the starting verse. I just want to do the next two verses, the next one verse, just so that you appreciate the beauty of Indian texts. We've done, it's been a month, we've been doing Tariq, no? So far we've done the three modes, we've done the three divisions. That's all finished in the first two verses. That's how Indians used to write their texts. Then the commentaries expand on it, of course. There's also a self-commentary to this. The first chapter has an auto-commentary by Dharmakirti, which in that 1960s, I don't know if it's the 60s, but that translation has it as well. Okay. So the first thing has said, there's only three kinds. Verse 1.4 and till 1.6 is the entire Tariq. So 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 is all of Tariq that we've done so far. Yeah, all of it. So 1.4 is both correct effect evidence and correct nature evidence. It explains both. Effects indispensable with whatever natures are present in a cause are evidence. So whatever effects are indispensable, indispensable here is non-accompanied, unaccompanied non-occurrence. If one is there, the other one has to be there. If one is not there, the other can't be there. Hence it's indispensable, yeah? Effects indispensable with whatever natures are present in a cause are evidence. Whatever natures are there in a cause, if those natures are indispensable for an effect, that effect is used as evidence. That's valid evidence. So that's talking about correct effect evidence. Yeah? How is it correct effect evidence? If the natures of those causes, which can be many, Like it can be fire, it can be heat, it can be hot and burning, whatever you might say, whatever natures are necessary for the effects to arise, those are indispensable for those effects. Hence, through the presence of the effect, you can infer the existence of the cause. That's correct effect sign. That's it. That he doesn't say anything more. Okay? So the first two lines are correct effect evidence. The next two lines are correct nature evidence. Even an entity simply of its nature that possesses relationship is evidence. Simply of its nature means whatever makes it come into existence, that simply makes everything else also come into existence. Yeah? You asked, who asked again the meaning of one entity? Who was it? Do you remember? You, right? Do you remember the answer? Even an entity simply of its nature means if something comes into existence, its mere coming into existence, like it doesn't need anything other than whatever makes it come into existence. If something else also comes into existence, because of that, those two things have the nature, are related as one entity. That's why our text gives a definition of one entity as phenomena with, what is it? Inseparable essential natures. And then when it's saying substantially one that arise with inseparables, this is the text. It says, if production comes into existence, whatever leads to production, nothing else is needed for it to be impermanent. If a pot is made to be form, whatever made a pot be form is sufficient to make it impermanent. If a pot is shape, whatever made it shape is sufficient for it to be form. Whatever made it red is sufficient for it to be a color. If you can posit that relationship, then those are correct nature evidences. So take pot, it follows it is impermanent because it is produced, because it is matter, because it is visible form, because it is shape. Whatever evidence you use, it has to be pervaded by the predicate of the probandum in two ways. Either because the causes are indispensable, or because the thing that led to the existence of the evidence is enough for it to be the predicate. You have to understand the relation that underlies them, but that's how it exists in nature. Once you can discover or unearth this relation, you can use that as a form of evidence. In the first case, it will be correct effect evidence. In the second case, it will be correct nature evidence. Okay? Yeah? That's it. Yeah? Let's just finish 5 and 6, then we'll move ahead. Valid cognitions that do not engage. This is correct non-perception. The two divisions of correct non-perception are being spoken of here, okay? The first two lines are the explanation of correct non-perception evidence of the imperceptible. And the next two lines are correct effect evidence of, correct non-perception evidence of that which is perceptible, okay? So 1.5 says, valid cognitions that do not engage are evidence which possesses the result of no engagement with a non-existent. Now this last, with a non-existent, is trying to prove, non-perception evidence is trying to prove the non-existence of something, right? It is an evidence that has a common locus between the explicit predicate and a negative phenomenon. Correct non-perception evidences are also the ones where probandums are negative phenomena. So correct non-perception evidence is trying to prove non-existence, right? Now what it's saying is, if it is a valid cognition that does not engage in something, like it can't engage in a ghost, for example, the inability of valid cognition to engage with a ghost shows that you cannot engage with the non-existence of a ghost. So it is merely the effect, or it is evidence that is showing that you cannot say there is no ghost. You cannot say that there is ghost. So if it is correct non-perception evidence of that which is not perceptible, your evidence is valid cognition doesn't engage with that thing. The inability of valid cognition to engage with something is proving that evidence which possesses the result which leads to non-engagement with non-existence. You can't engage with the non-existence of something, which means you can't prove the non-existence of something, okay? So if your valid cognition cannot engage with some phenomenon, then it can't show that it doesn't exist. That's 1 and 2. Yeah? Okay? That's what line 1 and 2 of verse 5 says. Okay? Now 1.5, the third and the fourth line are explaining correct non-perception evidence of that which is perceptible. And it says, in dependence upon particular aspects here refers to where you can engage in certain aspects. If your valid cognition can engage in certain aspects, so it's not complete non-engagement with the thing. If it can engage in certain aspects, which is either the cause or the result or the nature or contradictory phenomena. Remember, it could engage in the predicate of the negandum via either its cause, its effect, something or the other. If it can do that, then it can be evidence. Evidence can cause for understanding the non-existence of certain phenomena. So to understand the non-existence of certain phenomena, you can't engage in the non-existence of certain phenomena if that phenomena is not engageable by your valid cognition. So the non-engagement with a certain type of phenomena for you can only be evidence to show that you cannot ascertain its non-existence. Period. If you can engage with it because of its certain aspects, because of certain aspects it might have, in those cases, you can ascertain its non-existence. So verse 1.4 is the two divisions of positive evidence. 1.5 are the two divisions of negative evidence, which is correct non-perception of the imperceptible and correct non-perception of the perceptible. That's it. 1.6 is then the divisions. Okay, we're not going to do that now because we've already done them. What we're going to do today is from 1.3 come back to 1.3. Okay, so 1.3 is giving you the three modes. It's telling you that there's only three kinds. These three kinds are because of unaccompanied non-occurrence. If there's unaccompanied non-occurrence, it can be of three kinds: nature, effect, non-perception. Effect is explained in 1.4, first two lines. What kind of effects? That are indispensable with whatever natures the cause might have. Okay? That's effect. Correct nature science is whatever is merely the existence of the evidence guarantees the existence of the predicate. That's correct nature evidence. When your cognitions cannot engage with something, you can only prove the non-certainty of its non-existence. That's it. If you can engage with certain things, then you can prove its non-existence. Yeah? So that's non-perception. Okay? So technically, in 15 minutes, Dharmakirti is done what we've been doing for a month. But what I'm trying to tell you is, if you haven't learned all that, you can't, this doesn't mean anything. And when you read Madhyamaka, when you read Pragya Paramita, when you read other Pramana texts, they're taking it for granted that you know these things. This is being written to an audience who, like Dharmakirti says, wants to know, has familiarized, is unbiased, is discerning, and cares about understanding the meaning. If you just want to be wise and skilled and knowledgeable, and you want to give eloquent explanations of the text, or you're concerned with all kinds of worldly things, don't do this. Yeah? So as you can see, Indian texts require a lot of your own training. Otherwise, there's very little that you can understand. Okay? Yeah? Before we get it, so what I want to do today is, you see how 1.3, the last one, it says fallacious evidence is other. Let's just get through fallacious evidence, which is in our text. Okay? So we look at fallacious evidence in our text. Is there anything that's not clear so far, up till here? Yeah.
Although I think I understand your general explanation, but I'm not sure that I understand that in the second line of verse 5, at the end when it says non-existent, the non-existent is pointing to
the non-existence of something. Yes, so the predicate here, the predicate of all non-perception evidences will be the non-existence of something. So, permanent being a non-existent on sound is the predicate of correct evidence proving sound is not permanent. The non-existent smoke on a lake at night without fire is your predicate in correct evidence proving that a fireless lake at night does not have smoke. Right? It's always proving non-existent of something. Right? So that non-existent can only be proven if something is perceptible to you, which means if your cognition can engage in it. If your cognitions cannot engage in it, you can't pass judgment. So all you can say is, I cannot engage in that non-existent. Yeah? That's the second line. That's what it says. Got it? Yes. Yeah? The English is a little bit weird. Even in Tibetan, it's not exactly clear. It doesn't come across. That's why so many commentators have come up with different presentations of these things. Yeah? Naga, there's no mic.
Just for the recording.
For the recording? Okay. So Hendrik's question for the recording was 1.5. He gets the meaning, but the second line doesn't suggest it. Yeah, Naga.
Maybe a misunderstanding, but I feel like it's almost saying that people who cannot understand, they cannot study this subject, It's almost like going to Harvard. You have to have this much score, like Brahman.
No, it's saying, remember it's saying, if you care about the meaning of the text, if you are willing to be discerning in your attitude, and you want to understand the meaning rather than all the other things, and you're not concerned with worldly gain, then it's perfect for you. So it's explicitly saying, if you are attracted to the ordinary, if you are not discerning or you don't care about being discerning, then you don't aspire to these teachings. If you care about the meaning, but not the meaning because you want to understand it as a study or as another kind of accolade of your intelligence, and you are willing to be discerning about it, which means you're willing to put it in an unbiased manner and analyze whether it's useful or not, whether it's true or not, then for you I'm writing this text. If you are not of this breed, then I'm only doing it for myself. Then it's for my own familiarization with these teachings. So it's actually saying the opposite of what you're saying. Yeah? You see, it just starts with most beings. It says, if you have this, you will not understand the meaning of this text. And through this text, you're supposed to understand Dignaga's text. And through Dignaga's text, you're supposed to gain access of the teachings of the Buddha. This is the path to get into it, but these are prerequisites. If you don't have those prerequisites right now, please develop them. If you are not willing to develop them, you don't have them, or you have them but you're not willing to employ them in this endeavor, then don't do it. That's what he's saying. Because then you'll just be another, then the Tarkika is the Indian word for it, Sanskrit word. Togyewa in Tibetan. Then it means, I think in English, the literal translation would be an intellectual. Then you'll just be an intellectual. Yeah? Tark means reasoning, no? Like you use logic, then you're just a logician. So sometimes logicians are used in the translations as a kind of disparaging way of talking about people. Like looking down upon them. They're belittling the logicians. But the definition of a logician that is being belittled is not someone who uses logic. It's belittling the attitude of not caring about the meaning and only being interested in all the skillful tools and being a sophist, all of that. So if that's your attitude and you think pramana is for that and you're studying Dignaga's text for that, you're not being unbiased, you're not concerned with the meaning, you're not concerned with using it. You want to use it for some sort of ordinary gain, you want to become a professor of logic, you want to do logic classes. If that's what your concern is, this is not for you. Does that make sense? So it's not saying it's only for Harvard people are saying. It's for anyone who cares. Genuinely, though.
Because I think I see a lot of this, some people looking down on others,
Yeah.
because not everybody can get it.
So then you
I
should say
think
this
it's
to them. You should read to
misunderstood
them and say,
probably.
hey, most beings are attracted to the ordinary and do not possess the skill of discernment. They do not, therefore, aspire to these excellent teachings. Moreover, they possess a resentment, the stain of envy. The last part, I remember Gen he always tells me the story. Did I tell you the story of Gen in Tibet? Gen was a junior class of the previous Ganden Tripa, 2 Ganden Tripas ago. And one day the Gen in the south, Gen Padan Rabala, he was debating in Tibet with the seniors. And apparently he was really intelligent. You know, like some people are just born smart. He's one of those. And when he was debating, whenever he used to go for the group debates, they used to get very scared, apparently. And so that day he debated really, really well. And he came back to his room, and even Gen actually, Gen Tenzin Gyalme, he has a similar story. He came back to his room, and he was very pleased with himself. Right? Of course. Not really, but he was. And he was kind of like sitting on cloud 9, very thrilled with his accomplishment, having gone to a senior class. And that senior class had a lot of really wise people now in the Tibetan community who are very well known. The next day when Gen was walking around, he might have been maybe, I don't know, he was walking around, and the senior came to him and said, hey, you debated very well yesterday, but please remember, none of the reasoning that you've done, none of the skill that you have is your own. It's all through the kindness of what has been given to you by your teachers. So use your skill in an intelligent way to understand the teachings and be grateful and be humble about it. And since then, I think Gen has told me this story maybe 100 times. Because I also, every now and then, I have these moments of oh, you can destroy someone's position. But if you remember this, when you have that attitude, you will be jealous and envious of people who are better than you. And you will look down upon people who are not as good as you or not up to your level. So you don't want to debate with the people who are not smart, and you want to debate with the people who are better than you, but it's always a form of competition. That's exactly what this last is. They possess resentment, the stain of envy. If your concern is not studying for the purpose of understanding, for the purpose of attaining liberation, then all of this stuff happens, right? So that's your yardstick. That's the unbiased means you're not saying, I want to be right and this is the right thing without having checked. Discerning means you're actually checking for yourself. But the third one, you have to be concerned, is what prevents the stain of envy. Because if you care about something, if someone's not understanding it, it's the perfect occasion for you to try and get clarity in explaining it to someone. It's better for you. So you want to discuss with people who haven't understood as much as you. And from the people who can destroy you in debate, you want to go there because you're going to learn more. So your attitude just totally changes. Even Again, once he said, I think I can tell you, he was in debate in IBD, and then, in IBD we have people who come from the south who are these really great geshes. Gen was debating and he managed to whatever the person said, he managed to destroy it, because even Gen is exceptionally bright. And the people from the south were there and they were watching, so it was this great kind of very praising moment. He came back to his room very chuffed with himself, but quickly he said, if this is enough to make me happy, then why am I even here? What's the point? And then he went into depression for I think a while, which is why am I doing this? Why am I sitting here getting so happy and excited because I can have people praise me and praise my debating skills and destroy my classmates' positions left, right, and center. And this kind of was one of those turning points in his life when he was debating. Yeah. So that's what this is saying, Naga. Yeah. It's very different from what you just said. It's the opposite of what you said. Yeah. Yeah. That's what he's also saying. That's what Dharmakirti is also saying. He's saying exactly that. Did you have your hand up?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have. For the third category of correct evidence, when the topic might not be such as a ghost, where there's question over whether it exists or not. How does it seems like this is describing a presumption that ghost exists? I know this is an example, but if you're trying to find out if something exists or not, is that?
It's also Tripti was saying the other day, yeah. I understand that is a thing. So remember how in the definition it said in general it exists, right? That in general it exists is laying the groundwork for how you are looking at it as a third party. Yeah? As a third party, then in situations where things exist, you are watching two people debating, or you're analyzing a situation with two people debating, or you have a defendant who you know can't ascertain what is being said. For them, you will say, right now, it's just non-perception for you. Of course, the person who's engaged in it themselves, whether it exists or not, is not something that they can ascertain in that moment, right? So like we said the other day, there's two scenarios where this works. One, generally the person hasn't ascertained it. The challenger has ascertained it, and the challenger is saying to them, you saying it doesn't exist doesn't make it non-existent. And there's some examples that will come up ahead. The other situation is, I have ascertained it in general. Okay? I'm the defendant. I, defendant, have ascertained it in general, but I'm realizing that in this situation, it's beyond my ability to ascertain it. Yeah? Because it's like, the standard thing is, if in a laboratory with certain instruments, does that make sense?
But then, would that then be non-perception of the perceptible?
No, because it will be imperceptible to you there.
But smoke in that moment could be imperceptible to you there.
Fire. You're trying to prove fire on the mountain. Oh, you're on in that sense. Yeah. So, but that's how you have to distinguish between it. The non-perceptions is when it's not perceptible, means it's beyond your ability to grasp. Smoke, if it was there, if you went close to it or something like that, you would still be able to perceive it. Mm-hmm. Whereas subtle particles, since they require, remember that non-perceptible was divided in three. It's temporal, spatial, and what's the third one? And by nature. In the imperceptible one, it said things are imperceptible to you for three reasons. One is time. You know that story of Mudliana coming to the Buddha and saying, this person has no virtue, or that other story of Manjushri sending these people to hell, and Shariputra was like, what are you doing? Right? Oh, there's all these stories. So some people who have these super knowledges, apparently, these clairvoyant states, they could see like a few lives ahead. This is the stories in the sutras. So Manjushri does some stuff, and this person ends up going to hell. These disciples of the Buddha are like, what did you do? Why did you send them to hell? And then the Buddha says, their future states are imperceptible to you, but Manjushri sees that if they do this for now, they will be benefited in the long run. So you can't pass judgment about what Manjushri's done, because that is imperceptible to you. So certain things temporally are imperceptible, right? Certain things spatially are imperceptible. When that's the situation, whether it is in general or in that given scenario, then you can't pass judgment. If it is perceptible to you in that scenario or in that given situation, for you it's off the perceptible. That's what this thing here is saying.
Say the last thing again.
If it doesn't have these three, if the nature of the object for you is perceptible, if spatially it is perceptible to you but right now you're not seeing it, and if temporally it is perceptible to you but right now you can't perceive it, then you can use correct non-perception evidence of that which is perceptible. If the nature of what you're discussing in general to you is not perceptible, if in general it is perceptible but in that given time and place for you it's imperceptible, or in that, then you can't pass judgment on it. That's all that's being said. So, for instance, mental qualities, that's why we did that example. Are mental qualities perceptible to you? Of course they are. In general, your mental qualities are perceptible to you. right? So in general, mental qualities exist. In general, they're perceptible to you. But the mental qualities of someone else, they exist, but they're not perceptible to you. That's the kind of situation that you're talking about, yeah? Now the ghost one, I can see is something that, maybe the ghost was a terrible example because we don't know whether ghosts exist or not. But here the assumption is that they do. And for us, they are imperceptible. So particles will be similar. You can maybe in some laboratory under some heavy magnification see a particle, and you can say everything is made of particles. But if you come here and you're looking at things and you can't perceive those particles anymore in this area, you can't say they are not there, you can't say they are there, because they are beyond the ability for you to perceive them. Yeah? That's all that it says. But I understand the tricky one is, if it is generally inexistent, do you have to know it is inexistent? That I'd ask you to debate. Did you try and do that? It's kind of hard to do that debate, no? Yeah. Okay? Okay. So this is really basic and simple now. If there are, so come on to your text on page 300 and, well, it's chapter 21. Yeah, the PDF people, did you find it? Yeah? Okay. Ask everyone to stay back. We'll do the rest. Okay? It just, see that line over here where it's stated fallacious inferential evidences other than these three? That's the fourth line of verse 1.3. It's the same one. Yeah? Fallacious evidence is other than these three. Our text says, it's an extended translation of this. It just says fallacious evidence is other. Yeah? Okay? Just very short intro, you'll get it in no time. Fallacious evidence is going to be when evidence is not the three modes. Not being the three modes means it's not going to be either the attribute of the subject or the forward and or the positive and negative pervasions, right? How are these divided? If it is the attribute of the subject, but it's not the positive pervasion and negative pervasion, then it can be of two types of fallacious evidence. One is contradictory and the other is inconclusive. The terms are here, we'll read it, but just so that you get a short version of it, okay? It's contradictory when, if it is the evidence, it follows it is not the predicate. Don't write, it's all going to come, don't worry, this is all coming, right? Please write, please write. No. It's coming, I'm saying you'll be... Write it. Sound in the proof that, product in the proof that sound is permanent. Is it an attribute of the subject? Attribute of the subject. Product in the proof that sound is permanent. It's not an attribute of the subject? It can be an attribute of the subject, right? Is it the positive pervasion? Not only is it not the positive pervasion, it is the opposite. Because if it is produced, it should be not permanent. So that's a contradictory pervasion. That's one kind of incorrect evidence, okay? That's called contradictory evidence. It's coming, don't worry, I'm just giving an intro. Okay? 2, it's not a contradictory pervasion, but there is no pervasion. So take sound, it follows it is impermanent because it is a definiendum. It's not that if it is a definiendum, it can't be impermanent, but neither is it the case that if it is a definiendum, it has to be impermanent. Take sound, it follows it is impermanent because it exists. If it exists, it doesn't have to be impermanent. If it exists, it doesn't have to be permanent. This is inconclusive, right? It's neither here nor there. This is inconclusive evidence. And then there is the third kind of wrong evidence, which is where the attribute of the subject is not established. That's called unestablished. That's it. It's these three. So when something is not the three modes, it is either not going to be an attribute of the subject or not the pervasion. When it's not the pervasion, it can be of two kinds. It can be either a contradictory pervasion or it can be inconclusive. If it has the positive pervasion, but it doesn't have an attribute of the subject, then it's unestablished. That's generally what these three are. Okay? Yeah? Is that okay? Okay. With that, so let's start reading it and we'll try and finish at least one for today. Fallacious inferential evidence is explained so that one may know the ways one can deviate from correct evidence. Yeah? There's three primary ways that you can deviate. Based on the explanation above that correct evidence is characterized by the three modes, one can understand conversely that fallacious evidence is not characterized by the three modes. Yes? The exposition of valid cognition, which is now you have it, is 1.3, line 4. Yeah? Fallacious inferential evidence is other than these three. In general, inferential evidence either is or is not established to be an attribute of the subject. Yes? In cases where the evidence is established to be an attribute of the subject, the positive and negative pervasion between the evidence and the predicate is either ascertained accurately or ascertained in a distorted manner. In the first case, the evidence is correct. In the second case, it is contradictory. Okay? If neither a correct pervasion nor an inverse pervasion is ascertained, then the evidence is inconclusive. When the evidence is not established as an attribute of the subject, it is unestablished evidence. There. The same thing that we just said, yeah? Okay? It's three kinds. Attribute of the subject, done, great. Pervasion, done, three modes. Pervasion, not done, what kind not done? Is it not done because it's contradictory? Okay, one kind of false evidence. Is there no pervasion because it is inconclusive? Second type. Okay. What about when the attribute of the subject is not there? Unestablished. 1, 2, 3. Done. Okay? The definition of fallacious evidence is it is posited as evidence in a specific proof and it is not characterized by the three modes. That which is not the three modes. Yes? You're all very sold on to this. Take that which is not the three modes. It follows it is a definition of fallacious evidence. It follows it's not the definition of fallacious evidence. Take that which is not the three modes. It follows it is fallacious evidence. Take that which is not the three modes. It follows its definition of fallacious evidence. Why? It follows fallacious evidence doesn't have a definition. What is the definition of fallacious evidence? Okay, take that. It follows it is not the definition of fallacious evidence because it doesn't have the 8 doors of pervasion. Huh? Huh? You're preempting the tha. At least respond first. Let's go there, no? What you said? Fallacious evidence. What's the definition of fallacious evidence? That which is not the three modes. Okay. It follows that this is the definition of fallacious evidence. Who's saying why? What's the definition of fallacious evidence? Give me the definition of fallacious evidence. It follows that is the definition of fallacious evidence. It has 8 doors of pervasion. If it is fallacious evidence, it follows it is that which is stated in a specific proof and is not the three modes. Yeah? Take product, it follows it is fallacious evidence. Because it is that which is stated in evidence and is not the three modes. Just by itself. What reason not established? What did you give me as a definition of fallacious evidence? I'm just going on what you said. You said that. This is what you said is what I've said. Exactly the same thing. What is the definition of fallacious evidence?
It is posited as evidence in a specific.
Yeah, so I'm saying that take product, it follows it is fallacious evidence. Because it is stated as evidence in a specific proof and it is not the three modes. It follows it is stated as evidence in a specific proof.
Why?
Take product, it follows it's not stated as evidence in a specific proof.
By an evidence.
It follows it's not stated as evidence in a specific proof.
Why?
It follows it is stated as evidence in a specific proof.
Agree.
Follows it is not the three modes.
There is no proof.
Huh?
Just sound is impermanent.
Product, just product.
Sound is product.
Just product. Take product, it follows it is correct evidence. Take product, it follows it is not correct evidence. Is it correct evidence? That's not an answer. Take product, it is correct evidence. Huh? Take product, it follows it's fallacious evidence. Which one is it? Take product, it follows it is the three modes. Take product, it follows it is the three modes. Take product, it follows it is not fallacious evidence. Except it follows it is fallacious evidence. Because it is that which is stated as specific proof and is not the three modes. That follows. Wait, take correct evidence and fallacious evidence. It follows they're not exclusive. It follows they are mutually exclusive because they are contradictory. It follows they're contradictory. It follows they are contradictory because they're directly contradictory. Take that which is the three modes and that which is not the three modes. It follows they're not directly contradictory.
Accept.
Take product and not product. It follows they're not directly contradictory.
Why?
It follows they are directly contradictory.
Accept.
Take three modes and not three modes. It follows they're directly contradictory.
Accept. Yeah.
Take correct evidence and fallacious evidence. It follows they're directly contradictory.
Accept.
Take product. It follows it's not both
Why?
because they don't have a common locus. Because both of them don't have a common locus.
What are you referring to with
Correct evidence and fallacious
you said
evidence.
product?
No,
Take
correct
product.
evidence and fallacious evidence. It follows they have a common locus.
Accept.
It follows they're not directly contradictory.
Why?
It follows they are.
Shoot, why?
Try and make sense of this. Try. Because at the end of the day, you're going to say you haven't given us anything to debate. No, here, 1. Okay, 2. Let's do this. Yeah? The first one, so just contradictory we'll do today. Then tomorrow we'll finish inconclusive and unestablished and then go ahead with this. Contradictory short, okay? Evidence that is established as an attribute of the subject in the given proof, but that contradicts the predicate of the thesis mainly by way of the positive pervasion being unestablished, is called contradictory evidence. The definition of contradictory evidence in a specific proof is, it is an attribute of the subject in a specific proof, and the positive and negative pervasion in that proof are ascertained in a distorted manner by the person who has ascertained it as an attribute of the subject. So it has to be an attribute of the subject, and it has to be ascertained by the person for whom it has become an attribute of the subject in a distorted manner. Yeah? Here the phrase attribute of the subject precludes it from being unestablished evidence, and the phrase the positive and negative pervasions in that proof are ascertained in a distorted manner by the person who has ascertained it as an attribute of the subject precludes it from being inconclusive evidence. An example is produced in the case of positing sound is permanent because of being produced, right? So product in the proof that sound is permanent is contradictory evidence. Yes? What is the relation between contradictory evidence in the proof that sound is permanent and correct evidence in the proof that sound is impermanent? Mutually exclusive. Exclusive? What is the relation between what is the relation between contradictory evidence in the proof that sound is permanent and correct evidence in the proof that sound is impermanent? What is the definition of contradictory evidence in the proof that sound is permanent? You can write this as your relations and it'll make your life more fun. What is the relation between contradictory evidence in the proof that sound is permanent and correct evidence in the proof that sound is impermanent? Just do it. 1. Contradictory evidence in the proof that sound is permanent and correct evidence in the proof that sound is impermanent. Okay? Contradictory evidence in the proof that on a smoky hill fire exists, and same thing. Correct evidence in the proof that on a smoky hill fire exists. Evidence on the proof that on a smoky hill smoke doesn't exist, smoke doesn't exist. And what am I saying? Smoke, my God. Fire doesn't exist. My mistake. Contradictory evidence in the proof that on a smoky hill fire doesn't exist, and correct evidence in the proof that on a smoky hill fire does exist. Yes? Yeah?
It's the same as the previous one.
But with effect signs, yeah. With correct effect signs, yeah. And then generally, what is the relation between correct evidence and fallacious evidence? Correct evidence and fallacious evidence, just that. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. One sec. Please take it. Just get the mic. Please don't get fixated on just finishing the relations. The relations are meant for you to debate the meaning of all of these, yeah? Okay? Yeah.
This might just be stupid, but is there a reason why we say fallacious rather than incorrect evidence?
Translation preference.
Okay.
I kind of like false more. It's so much easier.
Which one?
False.
False, yeah.
It's one syllable. It's one.
Yeah.
What is it? Syllable, right? Just false.
Done.
But yeah, I don't know.
Did you talk about the 8 modes of formation of no, no. Yeah. I just.
Okay. Yeah. So just so that you know, we'll go through. There'll be a bit that we'll skip. I think it's from 114, 115, 116. Is it? Those there'll be a few that we'll skip. Okay? And I'm just letting you know that there'll be a few that we'll skip. And when it comes to skipping them, we'll skip them so you'll know when we're skipping them. In real time. Why? Because those are Dharmakirti's negation of the wrong definition of correct evidence, which is based on scriptural citations from Dignaga's text. So it's a kind of exercise of citing from Dignaga, seeing how Dharmakirti's teacher contradicts. It's more textual analysis than reasoning. Okay? The reasoning we'll do, the textual analysis part we'll leave. Yeah? Okay. That's it. Yeah. See? Training.
If it's redundant, you can disregard it. But it seems like you gave a beautiful kind of summation of verse 3, stemming from unaccompanied non-occurrence.
Yeah.
Sort of dividing into two. With
Yeah.
Causal and intrinsic.
Yeah.
Can you just go through that again?
I think our text did it, but
Okay.
there's different ways that you can talk about unaccompanied non-occurrence. One way that you can say it is, if it is a relation, it has to be, what is it, causally related, or it has to be intrinsically related, right? That's one way to talk about it, which I think often we do. But the unaccompanied non-occurrence is basically saying, if two things are related, then unaccompanied non-occurrence means two things are related. If this doesn't exist, that doesn't exist. This itself suggests that there is always going to be three ways that you can proceed. You can use this statement as it is and say this doesn't exist because that doesn't exist. When you're saying this doesn't exist because that doesn't exist, it amounts to saying this therefore is related to that. Right? Now, when you're saying it is related to that, it depends on that. It's going to either be the same nature as that or a different nature from that. If it's the same nature as that, that is same nature evidence. If it's a different nature from that, but it depends on that, then it's same correct effect evidence. So from the idea of, you can even take it so far to say dependent arising or dependent origination. From the notion of dependent origination, you by default derive these three. Dependent origination means this is there because that is there. This is not there because that is not there. You can speak of it in two ways. From this reality, you derive three dysyllogisms, three evidences.
How does the third come in exactly?
The third comes in from
By saying something is not there.
That's the first one. Unaccompanied non-occurrence is speaking in a negative way, right?
Yeah.
So the negative way is already telling you, you can say this is not there because that's not there. Just the way it's explicitly mentioned is clear, right?
So then what are the three?
So non-perception. This is not there because that's not there. Non-perception. If this is not there because
Okay.
that is not there, then this is dependent on that. There's two kinds of dependence. Same nature, different natures. Same nature dependence, correct nature evidence. Different nature, correct effect evidence. So through dependent origination, through dependence, which is like the favorite thing or the most basic backbone of any Buddhist reasoning is dependent origination, right? That itself is the ground for saying evidence has to work, inference has to work. Inference works because things depend on something else. So you just have to understand dependent origination. That's it. Then whether you like it or not, inference will exist. So when you're trying to prove, like, there's this non-Buddhist school in India called Charvakas. They're often, I don't know what are they translated as? I don't know, materialists or whatever they are. No, they're not. I don't know what they're translated as. Hedonists, right, hedonists. They are considered hedonists because they say inference doesn't work. The reason they say inference doesn't work is because they say if it exists, it has to be perceptible. Right? Which is kind of also what we say. Show it to me. Most people who will ask you to prove reincarnation will say, show it to me. Right? Which seems to be the big objection that people have. Chandrakirti in the Madhyamika Avatara, he says something very beautiful. He says, you can go on asking me to show you reincarnation exists, but if it's in the past, I can't show it to you. I'll tell you what. Reflect on dependent arising. You'll figure it out for yourself. He kind of just drops it at that. He doesn't even engage in them. Okay? But now that's a very nice sounding statement. Bring it into pramana. Understand dependent arising. This exists because that exists. If you accept that underlying principle, you don't have a choice. Inference has to work. Because evidences and predicates are related to each other. Whether you like it or not, if you say something depends on another thing, you can say, I want to see it, I want to prove it only if I can verify it empirically with my senses. But if underlying you believe that things depend on something else, you don't have an option. That's what's being said over here, right? And when you go and check how many options you have, the Buddhists are saying you have 3 options. There's only 3 things that you can do. Everything else is not going to fly. Literally, okay? That's it.